Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source Podcast. I'm your host, Jace, along with a special guest and a comic creator. And we're going to talk today about a series and a couple of series and an upcoming project from writer David Booher. So special guest, Aspen, my daughter, is joining me once again. If you listen to our Canto episode we did released a few days ago, and judging by the number of downloads, many of you are listening to it. So we're glad that everybody's enjoying it, and we're very excited, Aspen especially, to welcome David to the show. So David, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm very excited to be here. I know we crossed paths at LA Comic-Con, right?
Yeah.
When we were all allowed to leave the house for 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we had talked on social media so many times because I loved Canto. I knew my daughter loved it, so we really wanted to support it and spread the word, and it blew up, which was great. So it was finally nice to, meet in person,
Sure. Of course, you come on the screen and we all had our masks on, so I didn't even recognize you.
Yeah.
On the Zoom right now.
Yeah, 100%. So, okay, well, let's talk a little Canto. As I said, Aspen and I recently reviewed
Canto.
Yeah, the first volume. And I'll put it on real quick for people that are watching us on YouTube. So for some reason, it's not showing Aspen when I put the virtual background on, but I did. Oh, she's like, you're like a ghost, but we did.
So ethereal.
Yeah.
I love it.
Just briefly, you can see here, she even drew Merry Candlemas for Christmas. And I shared that with David and fantastic. So obviously she's a huge fan. So let's start there. It really was kind of the series that put you on a map as a creator. And the third volume is currently coming out. You've had some sort of tangential series, some one-shots and whatnot. So now that it's been out there in the world for a few years and it's been successful, and do you have a different perspective on it? Did you always have faith in the project that it would be as successful as it is? How do you feel about it now with the perspective of a few years behind you?
It's interesting. Those are two. I sort of think about this thing separately. So when we first started out, Drew Zucker, who's the artist and co-creator in Canto, we first started out, we believed in the character in the book so much that we were going to publish it, whether it was IDW or another publisher, or if nobody picked it up, and we were going to go and self-publish. But we just believed in this story and this character so much. And I looked at the first designs and I knew right off the bat, I thought, this is everything that I want in comics. And so I think there's a lot of people out there who also want that. So I was right on board with the character designs. And we believed in it so strongly that come heck or high water, Aspen, we were going to publish it. So being on, it came out in June of 2019. So we're coming into, we're 3 years, coming up on 3 years, and sort of looking back on it. We were so taken aback. We were so surprised by the success because nobody ever expects that. But then a tiny part of me was like relief, because you just publish these things and you want them to be successful and you want people to love them as much as you love them. And it's sort of, a tiny part of me wasn't that surprised because I was so passionate about it that it didn't surprise me a lot of people got on board. So I think the best part of being almost 3 years since that time, is being able to have the space and the opportunity and the support to tell the larger story that we want to tell. Because like you said, we have the first volume of 6 issues. We have the second volume of 5 issues plus a one-shot. We have a third volume that we're finishing up right now, which is another 6 issues. We're going to have a collection of the miniseries Canto and the City of Giants that we did this year, plus coming down the pike, there's going to be a 2-issue Canto miniseries that we're going to put all together into another volume. So that's 4 volumes already. And then Canto 4 of the larger story is coming out in the second half of this year. So getting the opportunity to put together basically 5 volumes of Canto, when started out as a little Clockwork Knight going on a quest, it's really pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I imagine you must have known pretty early on that you were going to get to tell more stories, right? Because it seemed to hit like almost before that first Wednesday. there was already a buzz, there were already people talking about it, right?
Yeah, it was a double-edged sword on that release day, because that first printing of Canto of #1, you couldn't find it anywhere. So a lot of the investors and speculators and collectors really were buying them up, which is wonderful for buzz, but it's tough to get that story into people's hands if there's no copies available.
Right.
So so the momentum really picked up right as soon as we were getting into that first release day. And then I forgot what you had asked me.
No, just about how it was the buzz, like right from the start, it was a big hit.
Oh, so we didn't really know. You never know. Buzz does not necessarily equal commercial success. Critical success doesn't necessarily equal commercial success, vice versa. So we didn't know until I think we started having the conversations a couple months after it's first released, seeing that we were going into multiple printings. Our editor, we started talking with our editor about what the future would be. But that said, we knew at least 3 story arcs, and we ended up breaking it out into 4 story arcs, but we knew them when we were putting it all together. We knew where this broader story, we knew where that first volume was going to go. We knew where the broader story is going to end. It's very specific what we have in mind as to how this all wraps up.
Well, that's interesting to me, because so often, and again, the market can be so volatile and you never really know what's going to hit. And so creators will sort of build in an ending at the first volume. So they think, well, if we don't get to continue, it'll be at least some sort of an ending. And Aspen and I were talking about this just the other day, right? Did you want to ask him about that ending of the...
So I had a question. So in the 6 issues, at the very end, it wasn't like the most happy ending that it could have been. I was wondering why you decided to make him not find his love's heart at the end.
Well, when you were reading it, Aspen, did you expect that to happen?
I had a little hunch, but I really thought that he was going to find them.
Right. And I feel when we were writing the story and putting it together, we really felt like a lot of people like you who were reading it were going to expect that Canto was going to succeed on his quest, that he's going to bring her heart back, and it was going to be this big, happy ending. And then where would we go from there? And, I always knew his quest was going to turn out differently than what he had hoped. Because one of the things I would like readers, especially readers like you, Aspen, to take from the story is that sometimes you set out to do something and you have a goal in your mind and you may not reach that goal. But by the end of your journey to get there, you might find out that there was a greater goal that you were working toward anyway that you didn't know about. And by falling short on what you intended to do, you actually achieve something greater for yourself. And so what Canto does in the story, he goes out in search of a heart. He doesn't, spoiler alert, he doesn't find the heart, but he comes back and he brought back hope to all of his people. So he may not have been able to save one, but he saved everybody else. And so that's something that I really wanted the story I really wanted to bring across in the story. So I hope you still felt good. You still felt hopeful at the end of the story for Canto and his people. And we're not done yet.
Yeah, and there's a lot, hope is obviously a big theme, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, because it came out in 2019, 2020 comes and the world changes, and all of a sudden we all could use a little more hope. So I want to touch on that and if it affected the story or not. But the other thing about the ending of issue 6, and Aspen and I talked about this when we did our review recently, was when he meets the Shrouded Man, it's that similarity of journeys, that the Shrouded Man's gone on this journey, Canto's gone on this journey. They both looked into the pool. They both saw their bruised and battered reflections, and they had the complete opposite reaction. The Shrouded Man took that as giving up hope, and to the point where he wants to remove the prison of hope, the jail of hope, that other people, whereas Canto took it as it's just more of a reason to keep going and keep striving. And that really resonated with me. And I think it resonates with a lot of people. And that's why this is a great all ages book. The older readers like myself who've lived more life, had more experiences, gone through challenges, we can relate to that. And it's a great lesson for younger readers. So when issue 6 dropped, and it was somewhat of a surprise, like you were talking about, subverting people's expectations. Did you get a really good reaction that people were thinking of it in those terms?
Yeah, we did. And it was so satisfying to me because, it's a risk not to put out the end, not to end a story the way there might be an expectation that it would end. And it was very reassuring when everybody was reading it, and we got really good reviews for that issue 6. We got good reviews throughout, but issue 6 really seemed to resonate with folks because I don't think they saw that ending coming. They didn't think he was going to fail when he got to the top of the Emerald Tower, but we still were able to end it on a hopeful note and still keep that theme of hope going. And I think readers really appreciated that idea that it was unexpected, but they didn't expect what happened in the story, but they expected how they felt about it. So we gave them the emotional reaction that I think everybody was building toward, but in a different way, how we ended the story, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And
emotional expectations, even if the story expectations, we threw out the window.
Right. Well, the other aspect of it was, and again, part of this goes to how successful it was. So I think everybody knew there'd be more coming. It just left the door wide open to know that there was still more of Canto's story to tell. And obviously, Drew and you had the great desire that, it sounds like even if it hadn't been that successful at IDW, you guys probably would have just continued self-publishing it.
Yeah, I think so. I think we would have, hindsight is 2020, right? And if it wouldn't have been successful, it would have been a lot of soul searching as to what to do from there. But I think we would have continued. We would have pursued the story. I just feel so fortunate that we never had to cross that bridge. That
right.
The readers for Canto keep coming back, and the feedback that we get is they keep feeling satisfied with what we're doing with the story. So I try to subvert some expectations and do things that you don't necessarily see coming. And I think that's been working for us really well. In fact, this latest, the Canto 3 Lionhearted, it's Drew and I have been really enjoying this story arc, and it's three issues in, or 3 volumes in, 4 issues in, and this issue number 4 that just came out, readers really responded to it in a very visceral, positive way. And I thought I think that was issue number 19 or something in the series, and to be able to do that after 19 issues, I don't, it's a little alchemy at this point. It's taking pen and paper and typing and somehow spinning stories out of it.
Yeah, lightning in a bottle. And it shows how much Canto has sort of outgrown the original creation that you and Drew, like, he kind of has a life of his own now. And the community around it, contributes to that. So, but we mentioned before about this idea of hope and it being a big theme throughout the story. And obviously with 2020 and here we are, 2022, pandemic still lurching along. Has it made it more challenging to tell a story of hope? Do you feel like it's made it even more important? Has it changed the story at all? Have you felt like pushing the boundaries of hope and bringing anything in from real life experiences or anything like that?
I think now I've sort of internalized the idea of hope after the last couple of years. So I'm able to channel my own, psychological and emotional response to what's happening in the real world and sort of channel that into the choices that we make when we're telling Canto's story. Like I said, a lot of the story was set back in 2019 before we had any of this, but it just became more poignant. Loss became a lot more poignant in Canto 2. There's, we wanted to have a story where the characters aren't necessarily safe. So, there's loss. We confront that head on. And I think that has a different dimension to it after, losing so many people over the last couple of years. So I think the story is continuing on the path that we had hoped it would go on before the pandemic and everything. But kind of the emotion that you see on the page and psychological reaction to a lot of the characters about adversity and hope and clinging to that is something that has an added layer since, the adversity that we've all faced for the last 2 years.
Yeah, like I said, we could all use a little more stories of hope, and the stories of this, he's an inspiring character, he's this little clockwork, creature, and, he has a lot to teach us about courage and bravery and whatnot. Did you want to ask a question about actually making the comic, Aspen?
Yeah. So when you were making it, during the process, did you ever think about like how you were going to continue it and how you were going to continue his quests?
So we did. So when we first put together the idea for Canto, we had a pretty clear idea of what that first volume was going to look like. We had every issue sort of mapped out. Here's the big idea of what this issue is going to be about, and this is where we're going to end. And so the next issue will go on. In chapter 2, we knew Canto was going to start on his quest outside of Arcana, outside the walls. So we knew he's going to be in the scary forest all by himself. And we knew that he was going to have to pick up a friend if he was going to keep going on. And he did. So we had that pretty well mapped out. And then beyond this first volume, we had big ideas about the second. Do you know anything about his second quest? Canto 2, Hollow Men?
I'm still in the process of reading it.
Okay. So, but you have the basic idea of what is happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we came up with the idea that we wanted to play with time and what happens if you're running out of time. And so we had that idea early on, and then once we were ready to make Canto 2, The Hollow Men, we started adding to that story and figuring out where he's going to end in each chapter and what's the next step of his journey and that sort of thing. And the same thing happened with Lionhearted, Canto 3, and then Canto 4, which is going to come out this fall, called A Place Like Home. We knew what was going to happen in Canto 3 and what Canto was going to have to do to get ready for the big finale in Canto 4, where he's going to have to sort of finish the task that he started out with in Canto 1, but it's taken him all this time to get to the point where he can now, maybe, this time if he goes up to the Emerald Tower, maybe instead of not having their hearts there, maybe he's found a way to save his people and save his beloved. We don't know.
Yeah,
I know. I'm not telling you.
Yeah, we'll have to. Yeah, we'll definitely have to read. But yeah, I've been not pushing her, busy with dance and school and everything. But yeah, it's like you need to finish volume 2, so because we need to do a review on volume 2 as well. Because yeah, I think that the idea of hope and the journey that Canto goes, to me, he only becomes more inspiring as the story goes on. And so I want to talk a little bit about process between you and Drew. You mentioned, I think it's right in the first issue. There's a quote from the creator of The Wizard of Oz, Frank L. Baum, about, creating a world and creating fairy tale and creating story. And I'm a big believer that you can tell a lot about a society and their sort of what's important to them by the fictions that they create, the stories that they create. And I think what you and Drew have done here is create a world that does, focus on themes of hope and bravery. And it has a lot to teach us of all ages. I keep going back to that idea that there's so much there for older readers as well. How did the seeing it come to life, the first 6 issues, the first volume, did that change at all your creative process between you and Drew, how you collaborated? Did it inspire you to go bigger? Or like you said, did you already have an idea? Okay, we know what the bones of the story are and we know how we're going to lay everything down. Or did you leave room to have things kind of grow organically?
We did. We left a lot of space to grow organically. I say we had story mapped out, but it's literally the entirety of volume 2 is maybe a paragraph. I knew what the obstacle was going to be and where we were going to go with it. Where it was going to end for that volume. So in that, we had lots of opportunities, and we still find opportunities to add new characters, to add new creatures, to expand the world. I'm working on scripts right now for what's coming in 2022. And I've found so many great opportunities to sort of poke around in the unnamed world and see these corners that we've never seen before, these creatures that we've never seen before, these, inhabitants. So we give ourselves lots of space to grow like that. And as far as the creative process from the very beginning, Drew and I were really closely collaborating. We got into rhythm, and now we speak almost every single day. As he's working on art, I'm working on scripts. It's such a fluid process as we try to hit these deadlines and get the books out, that I think we surprise ourselves and we surprise each other with things that we come up with. I'll come up with something on the script page, and Drew will get it, and he'll draw something, and I would never have thought of that, and it turns out to be the best approach to whatever we were doing. And that's because I think we're both a little bit in each other's heads, and it's a great team when you are collaborating so closely that you kind of can complete each other's tasks.
Yeah, it
kind of gets the storytelling. Yeah,
it gets to be like shorthand, right?
Yeah.
Did you have a question about creating, Aspen?
Yeah, so I had a question. What was some of your favorite stuff during the making of it? Like, what was some of your favorite art pieces that you had in the story?
There was one opening. Let me see if I can find it. There was one opening. I don't know if I can find it, but there was at the end of issue 1, when you turn the page and Canto's going on his journey, and you see him standing there, and he's looking out to the unnamed world in a place he's never known, and he doesn't know what's out there, but he's going to go find out. That was a wonderful moment for me, because it was that call to adventure for him, that I'm going to risk it all. I don't know what I'm going to face. I'm a tiny little clockwork knight, but I am going to do it. Yep, that's the one. And you can see Drew's perspective on it is so wonderful, because he did that point of view from behind. You can see how small Canto is, but if you think about it, he's this tiny little creature in this great big world, but the perspective in that particular page is he's actually big. He looks big, and it's conveying the idea that he is big enough, both, inside, to face whatever adversity is out there in that great big world. And sometimes, we play with perspective where he's tiny. When you see him meet the Kraken in issue 3, you see how tiny he is next to this huge Kraken, right? Well, we did that because we wanted to show how intimidated this little guy is when he's facing these giant creatures. But then we start playing with perspective, and sometimes you see that he's really big in the foreground, and whatever, like when he's approaching the city of giants, you see the giants in the far distance, and the way the perspective is, Canto and the giants both look like they're the same height. And as he gets closer, of course, it gets scarier and the giants get bigger. But that idea being that he doesn't see himself as much smaller or unmatched to these giant creatures that he will encounter in his world. And that's something specific we did when we were doing, when Drew was laying out the pages.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's great to get the nuts and bolts behind it. Do you prefer the world building, or do you prefer the character work, or does it depend on the day?
It's all character work. I've said it many times, and I am not. I'm a fan of world building. I love Lord of the Rings, and we just watched all 3 Lord of the Rings movies over the holiday break, and I've seen them so many times, and I was again struck by the way that they open, which is there's the story of the ring, and it gives you the history of the ring. There's not that much world building in there, but when you really connect with the hobbits is when you're in the Shire. Mm-hmm. And you see them just living their lives. And that is not, to me, the only world building that happens is in the tiny little Shire. And that's all we need. When I approached Canto, I did not want to put a lot of world building out front. I did not want to tell some big story about this is the lore of the world, and here's all the different creatures and people and inhabitants, all this stuff. All I wanted was to laser focus on a character who himself knew nothing about the world. So we have this beautiful setup. We have this little character who has to go on a quest, and as he learns about the world, the reader does too. Mm-hmm. So we created a scenario where we didn't have to give really any world building out of the gate. Just where Canto is, who his people are, what their circumstances are, and what his quest has to be. And beyond that, we will just sprinkle in the world building as we go. And you can see how it sort of unfolds and continues to unfold as he goes along in these later volumes and in the later issues.
Well, I think part of the reason it works so well that you kind of chose to take that path is because you have a brilliant artist in Drew, who even more than establishing the world that Canto is living in, he establishes the mood and the tone of the story, the emotional tone of the story so well. And especially the color work as well. There's times where the colors get dark and things are more menacing, like when he faces the Kraken, being inside the Kraken and whatnot. So I don't think we could say enough about Drew's incredible artwork on the series.
Yeah, and the details he chooses to throw in there, and just things that I don't write into the script, but mm-hmm. Drew sort of lives in the unnamed world, so he knows what to do, and he knows where to put those details. And I'll also say big kudos to Vittorio Astone, who is the colorist on mm-hmm. Canto, and the textures and the color palettes that he chooses for different scenes, it just enhanced everything. It fit and it made better everything that we are doing, storytelling, Drew and I. So we're so thrilled to have him on board, because he lives in this world just the way we do, and he understands with texture and color palette the mood and the feel and the tone that we want to convey.
Cool. Well, did you have a question about the community or reaction?
Yeah. So as a younger reader, I was very excited to read this, and I loved it. But I was wondering, with some of your youngest people that you've met, like the youngest kids, and they've read it or they've read it with their parents, and what their reaction was, and also their reaction to meeting you, or at least seeing you.
Well, Aspen, unfortunately, I haven't had a lot of face-to-face interaction with a lot of kids because of, we're all sort of stuck at home for the last couple of years. But I have had some. And younger readers, it's very funny because we call it all ages because, as your dad said, it's about, there's things that adults can get out of the story, and there's things that kids can get out of the story. And one of the youngest readers that I know who's read Canto and liked Canto, I asked her specifically, we read an issue together, and I asked her specifically at the end of the issue, so what happened to Canto and what's going to happen now? And she just told me, this is what, I can't remember exactly what issue it was, but this is what happened to him, and this is where I think it's going to happen. And she was exactly right. She was exactly right. So she got what the story was. Is she going to know about all the themes of hope and loss and courage? You'll get a little bit of that. But as long as a young reader, you follow the story, and then your parents can pick up on all these other themes and everything that we put in there, we've done our jobs, because that means everybody likes it. Everybody is enjoying it. So that's been really exciting to see parents and their kids have these reactions to the story, about different parts of the story, and still enjoy it as much as they can.
Yeah, and be able to experience it together. So like you mentioned, haven't been able to have a lot of in-person, but is that your favorite interaction? Do you have any other really great fun stories, whether it's somebody reaching out online or what have you?
Yeah, I've got a couple of I've had a couple of anecdotes that were really personal. I feel very fortunate because we've gotten a couple of messages where people who share very personal details about the two that I'm thinking of are about health and health struggles. And what they ended up taking from the story is that Canto, their hearts are gone, and they face this adversity. They have clocks, and they have a limited amount of time, and it's about what you do with it. And these readers reached out and they said, we have I have this health challenge, or I have this health challenge, and this really gave me a perspective about how to live life with a limitation, even if you know that your time might be shorter than other people's. How to live life and embrace courage and embrace hope, even though that's your reality. That's what you face. And to have this little fantasy book put in terms of real health, challenges is really remarkable. And then to just even to the most basic level, to write a book where people feel so inspired that they will share that personal information with you, me, who is a complete stranger to them, other than writing this book. But to inspire them to share those very personal stories, I think is a very, it's just a wonderful thing. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a great story. So, well, I want to talk a little bit about Killer Queens, your project from Dark Horse, and then Rain that you have coming up from Image. But we'll give you, Aspen, if you have any other Canto questions.
I have one thing that I'd like to say about it. Is that I like in the beginning where it says who did it, is that in case it's been a while since you read the first issues and you don't want to, and you don't not if you don't want to, but if you don't have time to go back, I like how they have the preview of what's happened.
The recap.
Mm-hmm, the recap of it.
We call that the previously on. Previously on. Yeah, we did that. We do that on purpose because we know that there's some time between, when you're reading maybe the first volume and the second volume. So we want everybody who has taken some time off in between, and also it gets published with gaps. So we really like to keep everybody up to speed. Eventually, we'll have 5 volumes out, and hopefully, they all get collected to some big hardcover book that's the size of a coffee table, right? We love that, and you could just sit down and binge that and go through all of them. But until that happens, I think those recaps, I'm glad you say that, because we really hope they're helpful, and it seems like they are. So thank you.
Yeah, they definitely are. Well, anything else that you want to add, David, about Canto before we move on?
I haven't had my moment yet, but the one moment that I'm really looking forward to is when we all get to go back into conventions. And if ever there is a kid, 5, 6, 7-year-old, who runs up in little cardboard armor, dressed as Canto, you'll see a grown man cry.
It'll happen. Trust me. Another one of her favorite books is Jupiter Jet from Jason.
Oh, Jason and Ashley.
Yeah, and Aspen was the first person to ever cosplay as Jupiter Jet.
What?
Yeah, at Phoenix Comic-Con. And Jason and Ashley were friends of mine, and I didn't tell them that Aspen loved the story and was going to cosplay, and so we just went up and surprised them, and they were over the moon. So I look forward to that for you, that moment.
Well, Jupiter Jet is another wonderful all ages book, and I think I stepped on you when you said it's by Jason Inman and Ashley Robinson, who are good friends of mine, and they pre-pandemic the Geek History Lesson podcast. I was a guest on there to talk about Dark Crystal, the TV show on Netflix.
Oh wow!
So and Jupiter Jet is one of my favorites. So
yeah, it's fantastic. Well, I don't know much about your title that's coming out from Dark Horse, Killer Queens. All I know is it puts the sass back in Assassins, I'm told. So
tagline is sass and putting the sass in Assassin. So we brought together an LGBTQ creative team. Everybody, me, artists, colorist, letterer. And we put together a story that's a big sci-fi romp that I like to call Guardians of the Galaxy. So it's a lot of fun representation. It's very tongue-in-cheek. I compare it to things like Rick and Morty and Archer, just fun comedy. And it was 4 issues. All 4 issues are out. The trade is coming out in March. So you can catch up on with it there. And I think there's going to be some news coming down the pike in 2022. But basically, the story is about two intergalactic assassins who are on the run from their former boss, who is a fluffy monkey with a jetpack. And they have decided to quit the life of being assassins, and they take their first non-assassination job, which takes them to a planet that is ruled by a fascist dictator. And of course, they have to rescue two kidnapped people from the free side of this planet. And they have a great plan. Of course, immediately nothing goes according to plan, and they end up getting caught up in this whole rebellion to overthrow the tyrant of this planet. And it's all laser fights and punchlines, and hijinks ensue.
Cool. Now, is it something I can share with Aspen? What's the kind of the age, the target age?
I mean, it's there's no swears, there's no explicit anything, so it's good. It's about Guardians of the Galaxy speed, I would say.
Gotcha.
So maybe, you dig that, Aspen? You dig that?
A couple more years, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Who's your collaborative artist on the title?
The artist is Claudia Balboni. The colorist is Harry Saxon, and the letterer is Lucas Gattoni.
So was this a concept that you had on your own, or did you develop it along with them, or did you bring them, kind of go out on a search to put the team together?
I had the idea, and I brought the whole team together specifically wanting to make an LGBTQ team. Yeah, and I've had this idea for several years, and I always wanted to do a series that had a lot of that was representative of my personal experience, which is it's not being a reformed assassin in space, right? So I always wanted to put out a series that really put that representation in the forefront. And I think we really succeeded with this. Readers, I had, it's another moment that you just have these moments sometimes and they just stay with you. I was at LA Comic-Con, and this kind of shy person came up to the table, a young like late teens, and bought all of the Killer Queens. And I think they had read the first issue and just really liked it, and was really happy to have that kind of, to see themselves sort of reflected a little bit in the series. And then the next day, a man comes up to the table and he says, "I just want to thank you for making Killer Queens." And I was like, "Okay, thank you very much." And he said, I don't identify as LGBTQ, but I'm really enjoying the story, just as the space hijinks." And then he told me his son came up to the table the previous day and had just come out to his family. And the father came and he said, "I just want to thank you for doing this, because this gave me and my son a series that we could really enjoy together." With this new sort of change in their family. And it's just like, that's why I wanted to do it. That's why I wanted to do it. It's what I wanted when I was 16 years old. So it just makes me happy that if I've just helped that one person with this sci-fi romp, then I'm satisfied.
Yeah, it makes it worth it. I mean, obviously, I'm a heterosexual. I'm married. Have children, what have you. I never had to worry about that aspect, right? Like there were always plenty of straight white superheroes for me to read about in comics, right?
Right.
And I'm glad that it's changing now. I feel like we're in a golden age in terms of quality of story and also diversity of story. And I still feel like there's a ways to go. There's still a huge segment of the population that hear comics and they think superheroes, right? And it's so much more than that. But it sounds like, with Canto going all ages, with Killer Queens and representing the LGBTQ community, representation is very important to you as a creator with the stories that you're creating. Is it something that you not necessarily have a checklist. I want to write a story that represents this or represents that or what have you, but is it always, it seems like it's a part of your creative DNA to make sure that that's part of the stories that you create.
Yeah, that I think about, doing Canto and then Killer Queens. It's very, it's two totally different things.
Mm-hmm.
But the one through line of all these is I just want to tell stories that I love and I'm passionate about telling. And I loved Canto from the moment that we created it. I loved Killer Queens from the moment that I came up with the idea for these two goofball characters. We'll talk about Rain, and I'm writing Firefly, and all of those things. I have such a deep love for every one of those stories. That's why I wanted to do them. And the representation aspect of Killer Queens in the all ages aspect, Canto is something that I would have wanted when I was a kid. Killer Queens is something that I would have wanted as a teenager. I'm getting to tell the Firefly story that I would have loved to tell if I was working on the TV show way back in the, in early 2000s. It's having a passion for the stories, that kind of representation, that kind of, desire to pursue these kind of characteristics for these different stories. It'll just come through, I think. It's just kind of a natural extension of wanting to tell these stories.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that you were writing Firefly in a way. And of course we all know the kind of the infamous story about Fox canceling it probably too soon. In a way, it was a little ahead of its time in terms of, diversity as well, and some of the things that it dealt with in the story. So what publisher is it with, and how did you get involved with that project?
Well, it's with Boom Studios, which publishes Firefly, and I'll pull this one down for you. So the backstory is, this was a one-shot that I wrote for Boom. It came out in September, called Firefly River Run. And it was an oversized single issue. But an editor I knew at IDW moved to Boom. And I reached out to her and I said, hey, let's chat. I'm a big Firefly fan. And she happened to be handling Firefly. So the opportunity came up to do this one shot. And so I had a great time telling the story about, are you a Firefly fan?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah,
so River Run tells the story. In the pilot episode, Simon talks about how when they reveal River in the cryo crate, Simon talks about how he got her off of Osiris and out of the academy. Well, River Run is the comic storytelling of how he orchestrated that on Osiris. And it was a great opportunity. It's to fill in a gap in the storytelling of Firefly that had not been told except for Simon's 1-minute monologue.
Yeah, like a foundational gap, really.
Yeah, it's like, well, how did River get on Serenity? And so we enjoyed working together, Boom and my editor and I. We enjoyed working together so much. The opportunity came up for the ongoing Firefly series. And they asked me if I wanted to come on to do a larger story in the continuity that exists in the comics. And of course I said yes. I leapt at it. So starting in February, they're actually ending the current ongoing issue 36 in January. And in February, it's going to be starting with all new Firefly #1, which is still in the continuity of where the comic's leaving off. But it's a new story that I'm telling over the course of 10 issues plus a special to wrap the story arcs up.
Now, does it feel a little different? Is it more challenging? Something like Canto or Killer Queens. You've created the whole world. You've created the whole universe. There's not really any parameters. You can do whatever you want. With Firefly, it's an established property, and obviously there's value there. So sky's not the limit. You can't just go killing off characters. For example, not that you would. But is it a little more challenging to work within the framework of a world that someone else created?
Firefly has been great because we have a lot of freedom to kind of, because the show was on so long ago that,
right.
Fox and Disney kind of sort of let it have its own life in the comics. So the idea that I came up with and the outline that I sent over to them was pretty much, kind of, I just wanted to do, this is the story that I wanted to tell. Now, when you get down to the pages and the characters and the interactions and those sorts of things, you know, my editors are the ones who are watching to make sure that they feel authentic to the characters.
Gotcha.
But I love the show so much that I've internalized who all these characters are, how they talk, how they react, how they think. And so I can put one of the most fun things about this whole Firefly project is getting to put, there's like 9 of them, 9 characters. And I get to pick, oh, I want this one and this one in a room together. And I want this one and this one and this one to interact here. And, you know, this one's going to make fun of this one and they're going to have, you know, a tiff. And that's because that's who they are and they never get along. And, you know, those sorts of things where I get to be the one who makes that up as we go. And that's like, you know, career checklist level things to get to do those. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And from there, you know, we mentioned you're working on Joe Hill's Rain, which you want to talk about the furthest thing from Canto. We're talking, you know, horror and terrible things falling from the sky. So why don't you let everybody know kind of what the elevator pitch is and let us know how you got involved with that project.
Rain is a 5-issue comic adaptation of a Joe Hill short novella from his 2017 collection called Strange Weather. And it's about Honeysuckle Speck, who is whose girlfriend, Yolanda, is moving into her apartment in Boulder in the middle of August. Beautiful day. They're about to start their lives together and everything seems to be great. And then the dark clouds roll in over Boulder and then the sky opens up, but instead of water raining down, it rains down crystal needles about the size of your thumb. And about 8,000 people die across all of Boulder over the course of 8 minutes. And Honeysuckle faces loss in this you know, apocalyptic deluge. And as the crystal rain starts spreading, she ends up having to go on the road to make sure the only person that she cares about is still alive in Denver, 30 miles away. So it's a love story, it's a survival story, and it's an apocalyptic story. And it's very exciting.
And I mean, I know Joe's a big fan of comics. Did he want to see this adapted? Did somebody from Image, like how did the project come about? Do you know?
Well, you know, it goes back to telling the stories you're passionate about telling, right? So I read the story from the collection and I just thought this has to be something else, you know, comic, movie, something. Mm-hmm. And I am friends. Chris Ryle is the one who's the editor on it. Mm-hmm. And I got to know him when he was at IDW. And I know he's good friends with Joe. And so I approached him and I said, do you think there's a possibility that this, you know, for an adaptation for comics? And Joe's usually pretty hesitant when it comes to adaptations. He, mm-hmm. you know, we all just kind of like to have our own material. But Joe read Canto and he liked Canto and he read the pitch that I had to take on adapting Rain to a comic. And we all got together, me, Chris, and Joe, and we just decided this was the right fit. And then Zoe Thorogood, who is the artist on Rain, absolute rising star, wonderful, talented artist who's got a lot. She has a very bright future ahead of her. We got her on board and we just thought, this is it. This is the perfect storm. No pun intended. Well, pun intended. Yeah. And so that's how it came together. But it would not exist if I had not pushed to adapt this story to comics because I loved this story so much. Just loved it. And I love Joe's work. You can see I've got his stuff behind me. And I've admired him for a very long time. So again, it's a bucket list, checklist, career checklist kind of thing to be able to work so closely with somebody you admire so much to adapt one of their stories into something that they can be proud of as well as I can be proud of.
Yeah, and I haven't read it, but it sounds like a very heavily emotional story. So I'm really curious to see your take on something like that. And like you said, with Zoe, you know, Impending Blindness of Billy Scott, which is her OGN, which is a fantastic story. Recommend it to anybody to read
Totally.
it. Even if you're like, I'm not a comic book person, it's if you like stories and emotional stories and kind of weighty matters to think about after you've finished reading something, I definitely recommend it. And I imagine that there's going to be a lot of that emotionality in the art of Rain from her, but also probably from the narrative that you're adapting.
Yeah, it's about love, and it's about loss, and it's about how we um, carry loss with us as we move forward in life. And I was reading a review of Rain, of this issue number 1. And it struck me because I always thought of it as a love story set during an apocalypse, and not an apocalyptic story, not an apocalypse that happens to have a love story in it. And this one review was saying, it could be kind of B-movie schlock to have crystal rain come down, and it could just be ridiculous, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the way into the story is not the calamity, it's the relationship between these two women, and sort of how in love, and how you hold on to those things no matter what happens around you. And I think it really grounds it in a very relatable story, even as the sky is raining down crystal nails and killing everybody in sight.
Yeah, fantastic. I can't wait to read it. And everybody, just so you know, it comes out next Wednesday, January 12th will be the first issue. And how many issues is it going to be total, David? Is it 3 or 4?
It's going to be 5.
5 issues.
5 issues. Yeah. So it's going to be monthly for 5 issues. And then later on this year, we're going to have a hardcover that will come out. And there's lots of cool covers that I just posted on my socials today. So we're really going all out. And it's my first image book, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, definitely. Well, David, it's been great chatting with you. Thanks so much for taking the time. We love Canto. Like I said, the review that we put up for Volume 1's been getting tons of downloads. Can't wait till Aspen and I get a chance to review the subsequent volumes and share our love of Canto with everybody. Mild spoilers, everybody, in those reviews, but we definitely don't cover everything, and you owe it to yourselves to go and pick up these volumes of this fantastic story. It makes a great bedtime story. I'm always pushing those, great way to get younger readers to read, something you can read with your children and share with them, because it really is for all ages. So definitely encourage you all to do that. So as we're winding up here, David, you mentioned your social media. Where's the best place for people to follow along with you online, know when you have new things coming out, or if they want to ask questions, that sort of thing?
Sure. On Twitter, I'm at David Booher. On Instagram, I'm at David M. Booher. I'm on Facebook if that's your cup of tea. And my website is davidbooher.com. And I am available on all of those platforms for any questions or comments. I will be posting about new projects that are coming down the pike. There's a couple more that will be announced soon, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited about, we didn't even touch on the Canto movie that's coming down the pike. So hopefully we'll have some news on that in short order. And in the meantime, pick up Canto 1, If I Only Had a Heart, Canto 2, The Hollow Men, and look for later this year, Canto 3, Lionhearted, wherever books are sold.
Yeah, I debated on whether I wanted to touch on the movie, but I figured you probably couldn't say much about it. But I will definitely be reaching out when you can talk about it. Because I can't wait to see it. Something I look forward to, Aspen, I will be there opening night for sure to go and check it out.
Me too.
So,
Me too.
Yeah, it'll be fantastic. So I'll put links to David's social media in the show notes, as well as a link to his website, everybody, as always. So if you're having trouble finding him, you can go and click there. We really appreciate everybody joining us as always. Don't forget to let your retailer know to put aside a copy. I mean, final order cutoff has already passed, but don't forget that the first issue of Rain hits next Wednesday. Pick it up, check it out, and let them know to order you subsequent copies so you don't miss out. So again, we appreciate everybody's support. Don't forget about our Spawn Daily throughout the year of 2022, Year of the Spawn, covering an issue of Spawn every day because we're just that insane. So again, we thank David for joining us. We really appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you next time.